Ridley is just an information junkie, and he's an unstoppable artistic force. It's a hard movie, I think, even for Ridley to make. There was a lot of locations, and these are gigantic scenes with lots of, recreation of the period, the era, sonically and visually, and he's just master at getting us involved in a world, and he did that in a genius-like fashion in this film, American Gangster. The story, American Gangster, was titled Return of the Superfly in New York Magazine, I believe it was about 8 or 9 years ago. And it was introduced to me by Nick Pileggi. And he is someone that I just admire in terms of absolutely understanding the gangster mind.
Well, I found a story, I should say. I found Frank Lucas about 30 years ago, and he was in prison at the time at the MCC downtown Manhattan. And some agents who I knew said, this is a really interesting guy. You should go talk to him. So I got clearance from the Bureau of Prisons and went and started meeting Frank Lucas in jail. He was doing 25 to life in connection with these drug deals. But now he was talking about the people who corrupted him. And I said, oh my God, what a story. Frank and I went out and met with Brian Grazer. And I have to say, he wanted to do this movie. You could see it in his eyes.
I then was completely taken by it. There was indelible in my psyche, and I couldn't let it go. So I bought the story, developed a script with Steve Zaillian, who wrote the script, several different drafts. I was then going to start this movie with a director other than Ridley Scott.
We started with a terrific director, Antoine Fuqua, and Denzel, and Benicio del Toro was going to play one of the parts. And it was just fascinating. It was great. But it's a tough business.
And we got about 3 or 4 weeks prior to the start date of the movie, and the studio pulled the plug, and all of the money, energy, and momentum just smashed full on directly into a wall.
Usually you feel, oh God, that's it. It'll never work. It'll never, that's fate. But Brian Grazer, who's the producer, he said, no, I'm not going to let it do that. I'm going to keep, and he did. He kept after it, and we started out again.
I was emotionally devastated by this because it's a movie that I'm absolutely in love with. So I waited about a week, and then I just charged forward again with all of my energy and full commitment. One thing led to another. I ended up getting Ridley Scott to direct it. And then with Ridley Scott and Denzel, we were able to get a tremendously great actor to play Richie Roberts, which is Russell Crowe.
I'm a great admirer of Zaillian's work, and he'd actually called me about 2.5 years ago, I think it must have been that, saying, I've written this thing, just take a look at this, tell me what you think. So, and I sat down and read it and thought, it's a great piece as usual, very well written. So then I thought I'd better call Mr. Grazer, Brian, who I knew but not very well, saying, look, I'm interested in this, I think we can maybe do something with this. What's up? What's happening with it? And he said, let's meet. So we did, and that's it. I knew if I could get a very strong Richie, I could get Denzel back into it again. Because Denzel had been there, and then it got awfully close, and then it hadn't happened. So I think he was kind of frustrated a little bit by it.
Initially, what attracted me initially? One day my agent called me and said, Ridley Scott wants to make it now. I was like, Ridley? So, okay, that's interesting. So we sat out and talked, and at that point he was talking about 2 other actors. As it turns out, it was Russell Crowe.
I discussed it first with Brian Grazer because it was something that was really bugging him because he believed in it as a project, and the fact that it had been so close to being made and then shut down and all that sort of stuff, it was still big in his mind. And my answer to him was, well, but who's going to direct it? Because that would be the key point, And Ridley called me about something else, and I'd asked him if he'd read it, and he said he had, and he was sort of like he'd love to sort of do that sort of thing, And I said, do you think we're going to appear greedy if we just make another movie together so quickly? And he said, who cares? And who cares? I mean, we enjoy working together, and I like being on Ridley's set because actors can perform, and the focus is on the performance. And so that's the kind of set that I like to be on, you know. And you know, I really enjoy spending time with him because he's a true artist.
I always location hunt, have to location hunt, because I'm saying I think a lot of people don't bother. I have to see everything because it's my homework. And my homework, I'm seeing the inside of places, I'm seeing the inside of houses, I'm seeing how people live, I'm seeing how people dress, and it's all information.
I knew that it will be very difficult. And interesting that we were scouting for locations about 3 months, and we cannot find any more locations like they were 30 years ago, because this happening 30 years ago. But the locations in New York changed in this 30 years so much that it was very difficult for the production designer and for Ridley to find the right location what Ridley likes.
What Ridley does is he works very closely with Arthur Max, but as you know, Ridley was an art director himself. He went to art school, he storyboards, he paints, and he just gets going. There was a lot of locations. I think there was 112 locations.
I mean, I said, how many? He said, so. I said, damn, we've got to actually, we can't do that. We've got to cut them down, and when you go through them, you can't. So then what you try to do is actually do as many as possible in one spot by crossing the street and coming back inside a shop, down some stairs, but you're still moving.
Ridley, when he decided he'd make the movie, he didn't have very much time to make it because we had to, it's not easy, but it is quite difficult to shoot in all these locations and to dress them all and create clubs of the era and then go to Thailand and make that, capture that in 5 days when it would take someone else 3 weeks.
Facing something like 180 locations and thinking how the hell we're going to get through that. The best thing to do is just begin. Take each day at a time, day by day. And gradually you're getting through it and you think, damn, we did 50 setups today, And so eventually we're averaging like 40, 50 setups, which is fast.
And he captures this stuff, and it's in his head. And he is a genius, a visualist. He understands, from my vantage point, dimensionality better than any filmmaker I've ever seen or had contact with ever. And in fact, his understanding of dimensionality is what got me to move from Los Angeles to New York to just be in his working process for the 5 or 6 months that we worked on the film.
I like working always with a minimum of three cameras anyway. So those 50 setups might only be 25 setups, except I'm covering within the setup. So you're finished. I mean, if you take a little bit more time to prep on 3 cameras, or if it's a big stunt, 11 cameras. And whilst it may take 45 minutes to set up, and then when you're ready, you say action, and you do 3 takes, 2 takes, and is everybody happy? And say, yeah, that's it. So you move on.
Either you're somebody or you're nobody. I'll be right back.
He really gives us a sense of the scope of Harlem. When Denzel blows this guy Tango away, who's threatening him, he captures the whole area of Harlem in a wide shot that you never could imagine. He's got, I don't know how many extras, it might be 1,000 extras. It feels at least like 1,000 extras. He's got 4 cameras at all times, and he's tapping them all. He's got a very good editorial mind. And he just makes everything so present and palpable. And I think that's the strength of the movie, actually, is the authentic quality of the film.
When you're doing a period piece, you want to feel like you're back in time. And it's what better place to try to do that than Manhattan? It's like history is trapped in the city. And, Ridley Scott promotes that. As you can see, his attention to detail is great. And that helps, again, to bring a truth to your surrounding. It's hard enough to have a camera in your face when you're trying to relay an intimacy, an emotion. But when the camera's the only foreign thing, it's easy to forget it's there and get caught up in your costume and your and the sets and everything. And he knows exactly what he wants.
I think it's a blessing to be here in this time of the year, here in New York. I mean, the weather has been great since I got here. A little bit of rain, but I'm from Puerto Rico, so I don't mind rain. It's just beautiful. You know, it's just been great. You know, really great. And then being able to shoot in the Bronx that I didn't know, Harlem, Brooklyn, you know, Long Island, and being able to know more of the city, it's just great.
I've shot in New York a couple of times. I love New York. I've done a lot of plays in New York. You know, I work a lot in New York. I lived here for a while and I moved away, but it's great because this movie, even though I'm not on the whole thing, has, what, 160 locations. We've been, you know, all over the place, and it's great. I thought, just out of, you know, natural balance of things, that this was going to be a nightmare, but I didn't care because it was such a great story and such a great character. Ridley, he couldn't be nicer. He couldn't be more impassioned. You know, he's manic in a way that's not destructive. He's manic in a very productive way. Constantly thinking, constantly being able to see through the story. He knows it backwards and forwards. And it's been collaborative. He's a very collaborative guy.
He gave propulsion, force, to a movie that has a narrative that is kind of spread out from different points of view. And you get to see how they work visually, but it's a gigantic production.
That's good. Okay, let's go again. That's lovely. Thank you very much.
You're dressing the street and you're dressing all the actors, and he gives direction to his secondary characters. He does long tracking shots that just keep going. He shoots his rehearsals because he likes the realness of it and he wants to move fast.
Cut to here, comes through in your hands already with intention. Then the next shot will be coming out. Glass everywhere. This is a tempered glass that's going to just shatter in a tiny piece like a windscreen. So I got one camera concentrating on Rory, another camera concentrating in the air. We've got two cameras here like this.
And he was able to also compress what would have been a 175-page script into a real shooting script, because he finds a way to do these very interesting and original montages that cause you to be emotional in the most economic sort of time frame.
We are now already on the 47th day of the shoot. We're almost finished in New York. We have 33 more days, and then we're moving to Thailand on the 3rd of November, and we had 5-6 days there, and then the movie's finished.
It's been about 6 weeks of preparation here, mostly done by Sonia Klaus, our set decorator in Thailand. She's done a tremendous job of redoing the feel of Bangkok as it was back then in '69, early '70s. And we did a lot of research looking at photographs of Bangkok at the time. And we found that there were a tremendous amount of signs and illuminated graphics, which we've added to an existing street behind me. It's a very accurate reconstruction of that time, the traffic, the type of vehicles, and the density, particularly the density. And before we got here, most of these buildings that you see around me were abandoned. And the difficulty of bringing it back to life, where there was none, has been the challenge. This is one of the busiest streets in Chiang Mai. It's a morning market, and it changes over into a night market. There's an enormous amount of congestion here every day, twice a day, as the market changes over. And we've added to that by bringing in all our cranes and cherry pickers to rig signs and neon and string lanterns. Coincidentally, with their important light festival, which just ended, which is one of their biggest events of the year, I'm amazed that we've actually pulled this off, because we've kind of rerouted traffic here in a major way. I don't think we could have actually done this in Bangkok itself, because it's changed so much and it's so dense, and the traffic issues are insurmountable to a large extent to try and do this kind of recreation. Whereas here in Chiang Mai, we pretty well had a free hand.
One version of the script, there was no Vietnam. And I thought, well, actually, it's extraordinary for anyone to do that. Book a flight, get on the bloody plane. I said, could you do that? I said, you fly there? He said, sure. I said, how do you do it? He said, I just booked the ticket. I figured we have to have this in the film. First of all, how he goes in initially. He has a cousin, a kind of distant relative, working out in Saigon, and he had a bar. And he was doing awfully well at the bar, and the bar was the source of a lot of heroin.
I play Nate Rose, who is the cousin of Frank Lucas, played by Denzel Washington. And the scene that we did today, where Frank is really trying to convince Nate to go to the source, and Nate's a little reluctant.
Huh?
It's not going to be 100% pure, Frank.
Yeah, well, I don't want it if it ain't 100% pure.
The market scenes are about meetings that take place with our characters, trying to get to the source of the heroin trade in the Golden Triangle up in the mountains.
So Nate, you got to come up the outside, mate. Come up the outside, right parallel. Woo, hold it there. Hold it there.
We were unable to come scouting early on, so we were shown several pictures of mountainscapes, and the decision was made to do it there based on the photographs. Eventually, after really setting up all our film production in New York, which is where the bulk of the film was made, we were able to leave and come and look. And when we got there, it was even more incredible than we saw in the photographs. Some very, very dramatic mountain peaks 2 hours north of here, where we built a complete traditional Thai village and rice barn in the valley overlooked by these mountains. That is where we're representing the opium processing center in our story, where our characters meet and arrange for a supply of heroin to be smuggled back to the States, which is all based on the true characters' recollections.
What you're going to see out here in these fields is heroin producing poppies. And the heroin producing poppies aren't here. So it's my job to populate the fields with poppies. In order to do that, we need to create a three-dimensional world. And how we're going to do that is through the use of these markers, which you'll see at different positions, close to camera, far from camera, and they will be responding in different parallax to where the cameras move. And our computers can then build essentially that field in 3 dimensions. And then I need to make them sit in there. And the way to make them sit in there is they have to be using the markers to lock them in to this field, and we have to use these spheres to know what the light that's hitting them is. So that's a way of creating a global illumination that will be mapped onto those 3D flowers, and it'll look just like they were really there.
It was interesting to shoot that last because that really took the movie all the way home for me. I was like, this guy came all the way over here by himself. And he actually just hung around for 2 months trying to make connections. He didn't have a connection. He went over there for 2 months and then had the guts to buy the stuff, walk from Thailand across to Vietnam, get soldiers involved, get them to bring it back for him. I mean, he was seeing what was going on with these soldiers. He's looking at dope fiends in the street in America, and then seeing how the soldiers were coming back, talking about the most powerful heroin was over there. So he put 2 and 2 together.
The biggest challenge here, I think the logistics, because of the distances involved. Some of the locations are separated by several hours traveling time. It's just trying to move so many people, so many vehicles over mountain country roads. There's been a lot of flooding recent period, roads washed out. It's very dramatic flooding. When it rains in the northern part of Thailand, the rivers swell and overflow the banks, and roads are washed out, bridges are washed out, and we've had some of that affect our travel arrangements, so we've had to bypass that very often. But it's all worked out in the end, which is the main thing. It hasn't been ideal, but the results speak for themselves, I think.
I think that this movie is so natural, everything, and it's very close to today's life, but isn't. And every scene is like, like a cinema de verite. And some scenes are incredible. Some scenes you think that's happening today, and they are actually 30 years ago. And you have not a feeling of time. Time is today, it's natural.
His work ethic is so admirable. It literally gets me kind of emotional. He has some ability to just grasp large chunks and wrap his arm around them and get us in that world. I've never seen anything like it.